Welcome, everyone, uh, our esteemed participants. A warm welcome to our webinar, Navigating the World of Cardiovascular Journals, Impact on Publishing, featuring Dr. Candice Silversides, the distinguished editor-in-chief of JACC Advances Journal. It's a pleasure to have you all join us today as we explore the ways to elevate the quality of your manuscript and uncover the exciting publishing opportunities offered by JACC journals. For those who may be unfamiliar, JACC journals are a leading group bringing new ideas to heart health, showcasing original research and review articles that push the boundaries of our understanding in this vital field. With a commitment to highlighting the emerging areas of cardiovascular care, these journals provide a platform for groundbreaking research and novel approaches to diagnosis and treatment. Today, we are honored to have Dr. Candice Silversides with us to share her insights and expertise. Dr. Candice Silversides is a professor of medicine at the University of Toronto, chair in pregnancy and heart disease at the Miles Nadal Heart Center, and director of the cardio obstetrics program at Mount Sinai Hospital. She also works at the Toronto General Hospital, specializing in echocardiography. She is the inaugural editor-in-chief of the American College of Cardiology's newest journal, JACC Advances. In addition to acting as an editor-in-chief, she has published extensively in the field of cardiology and contributed to many leading cardiology textbooks, international practice guidelines, and consensus statements. She was awarded the Kent Hewland Distinguished Career Award and the Canadian Society of Cardiology 2023 Achievement Award for her contributions to the field. Throughout this webinar, she will guide us on through an enlightening discussion on publishing opportunities at the JACC journals, the importance of consuming high-quality content, and the evolving research landscape across different regions, and essential editorial tips to enhance the quality of your publications. Following Dr. Silverside's presentation, we'll have my esteemed colleague Corina Negru, who I will introduce later, present various high-impact journal families published by Elsevier. Participants will also have the opportunity to engage in a dynamic question and answer round after the presentations. Once again, I extend my warmest welcome to all of you. Just a few housekeeping requests. Kindly stay on mute for the entire duration of the webinar, and please feel free to post your questions in the Q&A section only. We shall address them during the Q&A round. So, without further ado, I invite Dr. Candice Silversides to commence the session with her presentation.
Well, thank you very much for that nice introduction, and also thank you for inviting me to be here today. So I just want to confirm that you are able to see my screen right now. Perfect. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to speak about publishing in the future of medical journals. And then, as you've heard, I'm happy to take questions as well at the end. So you've heard already, I'm an editor-in-chief of JACC Advances. This is the newest sister journal in the JACC family of journals. And this is the American College of Cardiology journal for journals. So just as a background, the first medical journal started in 1684. This is just an image of one of the pages from it. It was called the Medicina Curiosa. And so that was back in the 1600s. And in fact, for many, many years, really, the idea of what a medical journal has been fairly similar. You know, when I started, we'd have stacks and stacks of journals on our desk to read. But times are really changing, and the landscape of medical publishing is undergoing dynamic transformations driven by technological advances, evolving research practices, and changing reader preferences. And so today I really wanted to touch on just the things that are changing in our field, how it impacts you as researchers and investigators. So I'm going to cover first a little bit about publishing, about conducting studies and understanding the editorial process, and then a little bit about where I think the future of medical journals is going. So this is Anthony DeMaria, who was the editor in JACC a number of years ago, and he just reminded us that the primary objective of medical journals is to publish important new information that influences clinical care or subsequent research. And that's really the mandate, I think, of most journals, including the Jack family of journals. So how do you publish this important research? Well, getting published really starts with a good study. And so there's three aspects of a good study that I wanted to touch on. First of all, conceiving a research study, conducting the study itself, and then finally a little bit more about the publishing process. So in terms of conducting a study, it really starts with figuring out a good question. There is a tool that you can use when you think of a question to try and adjudicate if it's worth pursuing. It's called the Finer criteria. And so what you should think about is first, is the study feasible at your institution? Or if it's more institutions than one, is it feasible? Is it an interesting question? Is it novel? Is it ethical? And is it relevant? So when you're thinking about feasibility, it's often good if you're running a study to think about what your local expertise is and what you can offer, whether it's a unique population, a unique data set. And this, for example, is a paper that just came out in JACC Advances recently. And I highlight it just because Scotland had this really unique data set of patients with Takayasu's syndrome, Takotsubo syndrome. And they also had a similar large cohort study of somewhat matched patients. And so they had this unique population and a unique data set that they could tap into to answer questions. And so I would say you should start by thinking about what you have available that might be unique. The other issue is thinking, is the question one that might be relevant to the cardiology community? And that probably takes a little bit of thought from your team members that are doing research with you. This, however, is just something interesting. It was prepared by Karina Negru, who you heard about earlier in the introductions. And this is just a key phase analysis from the JACC journals between 2018 and 2022. And the words that are bigger are topics that are more hot topics that are being published, and smaller ones are less commonly published. And it's just common general themes in the journals. But as you can see, things that are contemporary and of interest to the cardiology community are things like valve disease, transcatheter procedures, percutaneous coronary interventions, atrial fibrillation. I think many things we would think of, but that just gives you some idea of things that are being published. The other thing that's clearly being published, but wasn't a key word in the diagram I just showed you, is research related to artificial intelligence. On the x-axis, you see here time. On the y-axis, you see the number of patients in machine learning and AI that are being published over the years, and you can see that that's really growing exponentially. So that's a field that really is evolving, I think, in all journals, including cardiology journals. So once you've established a good question, you want to make sure you conduct the study correctly. And really, I think it's really important that you think of your study design in advance. Involve statisticians in advance if you need to. Certainly involve methodologists to make sure you do it right. Because once it's done, you've either done it correctly or you haven't. And if you haven't done it correctly, you may have introduced bias that unfortunately will confound your results. So one way to make sure you're conducting a study that I would highly recommend is you go to reporting guidelines. So you can go to the equatornetwork.org, and on that website, you'll see reporting guidelines for various types of studies. And they really help to improve the transparency, the clearness, and the completeness of how you're reporting studies. So for instance, if you look at the top one here, the consort guidelines for randomized clinical trials, they provide a 20-item checklist that provides authors with a solid backbone about how to construct and report your studies. And you can see there's different types of reporting guidelines depending on the type of study you're conducting. Some journals mandate that you've used these when you develop your study and report your study. So please think about using them early. The other thing you do want to think about, especially for randomized trials, but is registering your trial in advance. This again is mandated by many of the larger journals, and it's important for the reason that the medical community and the publishing community is really trying to eliminate publishing bias, and this was one way to do it. So if you look on the x-axis here, you'll see the year of publication. That big line going right through the middle is the year 2000, and that's when clinicaltrials.org was introduced. So everybody that was publishing in big, large journals had to register their trials if they were getting, substantial funding from, say, the NIH in the United States or other granting agencies. So if you look at before that year 2000, what you see is most of the publications were ended up in these black little dots with the cross in them. Those are studies that report a benefit. So before registering in advance, most studies that got published reported a benefit. But as you can see, after the year 2000, what happened is most of the dots turned to the blue colored dots. The blue colored dots are null effects. That means the study didn't report any benefit or any harm, but it also didn't show a benefit. So what you can see here is once they introduced clinicaltrials.gov for large trials, we lost or it helped to eliminate some of the positive trial publishing bias that had been occurring prior to that time. The other aspect of just conducting a good solid trial is really the statistics. And certainly I'll tell you this as an editor is something I see not done well fairly frequently. I think either people don't know statistics themselves and haven't been able to recruit the right person to truly help them do the statistics, or perhaps the statistician just simply isn't engaged enough. But it really is important to find if either you're qualified, great. But if you're not, make sure you really find somebody who will help you make sure the stats are done solidly. And the last bit I want to mention is just about getting published. First of all, the most important thing is when you're submitting your work, pick the right journal. Elsevier has a really nice overview of this on their website. So you can go to the Elsevier website that I've shown here, but it is really important. And the way you can pick your journal is you go to the About page on the journals, and it'll tell you a little bit about the journal. So for instance, JACC Advances, the journal I'm the editor-in-chief of, we say we're a peer-reviewed open access journal, cardiovascular, general cardiology with a focus on emerging areas in cardiology, but we really cover all general cardiology topics for the most part. And on this page, it would also list things we're interested in. And then it just says we publish original research, viewpoints, and state of the art. So it gives you some guidance about what the journal is looking for itself. I am going to put a caveat, watch out for predatory journals. These are journals that will tell you they'll publish your paper, they'll perhaps do little or no peer review, but they'll certainly charge you a fee for it. And in the end, you may end up with a journal that's really not an established journal or one that really is just trying to get the money of the investigators and not provide the services needed to really get a study out there in a meaningful way, i.e. get it indexed and get it available for other researchers. I want to comment briefly on peer review because it is a big aspect of moving your paper through the process. And this is a quote from Richard Norton, who's the editor-in-chief of The Lancet. And he says, while the public portrays a peer review as a quasi-sacred process, we all know that really it has many limitations and has lots of issues with it. But nonetheless, it is where we are right now. And so we have to live with peer review. I mean, peer review, when it's done well, can really help your manuscript get better. So there's some really good advantages of tapping into the expertise of people that know the field. But, there can be biases introduced. And I think editors and journals around the world are really trying to see if they can eliminate bias. One is that some journals are using double-blind anonymous peer review. That hasn't been picked up everywhere, but it is an idea. And there also is new AI methodologies to help with peer review that are being considered. So I do think it will evolve. I don't think it's perfect, but I think when it does work, it can be very helpful. And, we try to minimize bias as much as possible at the editorial board level. The other way you can get your work reviewed is to go to preprint servers. These have really taken off in the last number of years, and you can upload work before it's published to get advice from other investigators around the world about the study and to help try and improve the study before you send it for a formal peer review. So this is a gentleman who's just got his reviews back from the decision letter back from the editorial team. And I want to comment a little bit about decision letters. So what do they mean? So if your manuscript is rejected without review, it probably is that the editor just thought it wasn't suitable, or perhaps it really just wasn't hitting the mark of what the journal expectations were. But often it's just, it may just not be aligned with what the focus of the journal is. If it's transferred to a sister journal, so I'm a sister journal, I often have transfers from, say, main JAC. It may just be that the paper actually is more suitable or more aligned with that journal. So in JAC, we have cardio-oncology focused journals, basic science focused journals, EP focused journals, and sometimes papers are just diverted to sister journals because they align more specifically with the sister journal. And it really is important. Don't take it personally. This just means this isn't the right journal for you. In some ways, finding out sooner instead of later and being able to move to the next appropriate journal is more helpful for you as an author. And then there is other decisions that come back. You may get minor or major revisions. This means that the editors are interested. Please do your best to answer the revisions in the most meaningful way you can, because that means when we send this back, we're usually interested in trying to work with the authors to get it published. If you get a decision letter that says you can do a de novo resubmission, it means there's really some big stuff that needs to be tackled. Likely you have to repeat analysis, but still that the editors think the content is important, the study has value, and they're willing to give you another second crack. So if you're willing to do the work, a de novo resubmission is a reasonable thing to try because it does mean the editors already bought into the importance of your study. And then if you're lucky enough and it gets accepted, celebrate. But remember, the acceptance doesn't end on getting publications. You really do want to disseminate your work in the year 2024. And, back in the day, you'd have a paper and you'd go to a meeting and you'd tell two friends and they'd tell two friends. But times have certainly changed. And now we use a lot of different multimedia to try and get papers out there, whether it's X, which is Twitter, or podcasts or webinars, something like this. But it's really important to try and get your work to researchers and clinicians that can use the results. And just to highlight kind of how big this has become, this is Valentine Fuster, who does the JAC podcast for Main JAC. And in the year 2022, he had more than 13,500,000 listeners. So you really can hit a wide audience. Obviously, this is an exception, but it does show you that there really is a big audience out there that has a real appetite for the dissemination of cardiovascular research and medicine in general. And so for the last 10 minutes, I want to talk a little bit about the vision of things and where kind of the medical journal field, I think, is going. I think one big aspect of where we're going is we're turning green, but many journals will not be paper journals, and you will already see or many journals have already turned into electronic journals, including my journal, JAC Advances. It is an online journal. You'll also see this concept of journal families. So here we have it in the JAC family of journals, but certainly, Lancet has it, European Heart Journal has it, AHA journals have it. So this idea of journal families is really getting a lot of traction. And I do think it also can help authors because it can help you find a journal that's right for your studies. I think journals and research in general has become a lot more global after the last number of decades. And this is just an example from the JAC journals. Thank you, Karina, for providing this type of data for me. But what you can see is if you look at where people are submitting to JAC journals, it's people doing work all around the world. And so, one of the things as an editor, we certainly try and look to promote research from different parts of the world because it often offers unique perspectives and unique patient populations that we can all learn from. And I think that is a trend amongst many journals. The other aspect that's happening in the medical publishing world is that many journals are turning to open access. So going from a pay to read model to a pay to publish model. And I mention this because, well, first of all, JAC Advances is an open access journal. I think, getting the right price point for authors can be tricky, but there is help for authors to try and help them get their work published if you do have open access. But the value of open access, and I've really seen it having been an editor of Jack Advances, is once you get an open access paper published, you can really disseminate it to anybody. Anybody can look it up, read the paper. I think you have a larger impact. So I think there's always going to be subscription models and open access, but open access does have some value. And certainly a lot of the larger granting agencies right now are mandating that if they give you government funding for research, that you publish in open access so that the results of the study are available to all. The other thing that's happening is I think journals are getting more integrative with using more integrative and multimedia forms of representing their data. So, for instance, in the Jack journal, they publish the global burden of cardiovascular disease. If you go to the website, you can click on it. And it's a great example of an interactive tool. You can click on a country, it'll tell you their CVT mortality rates, it'll tell you risk factor profiles in various regions, and it'll tell you about that global burden cardiovascular disease in the region of the world you want to find out about. And I think journals will increasingly use these different tools to help readers become more engaged and to get more out of research. I think, something similar to Instagram. That's why I have an Instagram logo here. I think we'll use machine learning algorithms to provide personalized content for readers. So you don't just go on and look on the table of contents, but you'll have a personalized, for instance, table of contents that is specific to your interests. So, it works something like this. You'd go on and have some bespoke curation. You maybe get daily emails or texts telling you about important areas in your field, or alternatively, if you do look for a paper or pull up a paper, you may get links to related topics, links to papers related to the methodology, so you can understand that perhaps a bit better, or other internet resources. So I think journals are going to get more creative as time goes on about really this multimodality education for readers. And also, I think everybody here would probably know that tools are emerging to facilitate a share early, share often approach with research in general. And so, for instance, there's data sharing platforms like Figshare, and there's code sharing platforms like GitHub. And this is just another way that I think the research field and the medical publishing field is changing. We're using different type of platforms to have input in a lot of different ways. And I think just really thinking about where the future might be is that journals will not only incorporate those types of enhanced networking features, but also allow authors, reviewers, and readers to connect within platforms. I mean, it's not happening tomorrow. I said these are a little bit visionary about where we're going, but I do think we have a lot of the structure for some of these things to happen. And I do think, we're already seeing that journals online are becoming increasingly more multimodality and integrated. And I think we'll see more and more of that in the future. A few cautionary tales, though. We do have AI's great. It will allow for those new platforms, but it also has some disadvantages. One thing I think we're going to have to figure out what to do about is large language models, like from a publishing point of view. We currently have, I would say, a very general statement in the Jack family of journals about what to do if you use ChatGPT or other large language models. You really, right now, we're just asking that you disclose it both in your cover letter and also in the methods or acknowledgements of your paper. But I think this is a work in progress. Clearly, we're going to find out when it does and doesn't work, that these tools are used and how they can be used, in an appropriate way in publishing. But I think this is something we're going to have to figure out over the next probably 2 to 3 years, is my guess. The other issue with AI is that AI can generate images, and so there's the problem of fraud in scientific publishing as it relates to imaging in particular, as a first example. And you can see these green boxes here in this histopathology, in this basic science paper, were original images. The red ones are AI generated images. And And this can be a big problem. It's already been identified in a few instances. However, on the good side, there's also AI tools that can help to identify images that are generated by AI tools that are fraudulent. And so, there may be ways that AI can help publishing as well. And my last comment I want to make really is about impact factor, because impact factor is an important factor used in adjudicating journals in the current era. So just as a reminder, it is a main metric we use. It was invented by a librarian, although the person that invented it was much more complicated than a librarian, had a background in a number of different things. But it was originally invented as a tool for libraries to decide which journals to purchase, and it was based on the number of citations over the prior 2 years. However, as I said, it was never designed for journals themselves as a way to identify their scientific value. And so there is a lot of criticisms that it wasn't designed for that. There's questions about its statistical validity, and also even about how science is in fact assessed. So, there is criticisms about the impact factor, but it's not going anywhere anytime soon. And so it is how we adjudicate journals right now. Certainly, I'm lucky to be working with a JAC family of journals where there is a long history of high impact factor ranked journals in the JAC journals, main JAC, or some of the sister journals. You can see their impact factor relative to some of the other cardiovascular journals in the Elsevier platform. But this may also evolve over time if we're thinking about the future. And this is again back to Anthony DeMaria, who said some wise things about medical publishing. But he did note that it is very possible that altmetrics or some other metric will in the future displace impact factor and become, he calls it the ejection fraction of medical journals of the future. So I don't know where it's going. It's here right now. I don't think it's changing anytime soon, but there is other ways that information is getting out to readers and to the scientific community that are quite important now, that are not integrated into the impact factor. So I'm going to leave you with these summary comments. First of all, as it relates to publishing your studies, remember, design your studies carefully. Think about using some of those tools so that you make sure you eliminate bias and produce the best possible study. Understand the editorial process. Please don't be discouraged. It's hard to get published, but it can be done. Again, find the right journal, do the best science, and things will work out. Use social media once your study is published to make sure you get your ideas out to the world. And in terms of where things are heading, I don't know with certainty, but I can tell you there is more open access journals. With that, unfortunately, comes more predatory journals, so beware. AI will likely help to improve both the researcher and the reader experience as time goes on. I think the role of large language models is evolving, so keep your eyes open to what that will involve for you as an investigator. And the medical journal of the future, I think, remains to be defined. I think we're in a really exciting time about all the possibilities to make a really interactive journal for readers and for researchers. And I think the next 5 to 10 years, really exciting things are going to happen. So if you'd like to learn more about JAC journals and JAC advances in particular, you can go to the JAC website at sciencedirect.com, or you can go to jac.org. You can, unfortunately, this barcode doesn't work, but we will share a barcode that works if you want to request access to JAC journals. And so thank you very much for joining today. It's really nice to have so many participants, and I'm happy to take questions. This is a picture of my city, Toronto, where I'm speaking to you from today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Silversides. We'll take the question after Corina's presentation, right? So you can take a break, have a glass of water. But I think you touched on some very interesting points around the advent of AI into this entire scenario. I think a lot of people have been asking questions around that, about the not only the fake journals, but also not only the predatory journals, but also the fake journals, the cloned journals. I think these three terms should always come together: fake, cloned, and predatory, because they're three different types, but they are
Yeah.
all, in a sense, the same family. So I have some very interesting questions that I've already received, and have a glass of water, and then we can come to the question and round. Meanwhile, I would like to introduce my colleague, Corina Negru, who has been with Elsevier for over a decade now and has served in various roles across different teams. She's been recently appointed as the Researcher Solution Manager at Elsevier, taking care of the European market. Her background is mainly in knowledge transfer, and she has her expertise in marketing strategy and data analytics. So over to you, Corina.
Thank you so much, both of you. I'm trying to share my screen. Let me know if you see it.
Perfect.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I just thank you all for being here. Thank you, Dr. Silversides and Vishal, for introducing me warmly. I am indeed part of Elsevier, and I wanted to share with you just a couple of minutes about some other high-impact journal families that Elsevier publishes. And the reason for which I think this is important is because time and time again, we hear from our researchers, specifically in medicine, that reading high quality interdisciplinary content increases so much the quality of their publications and leads to innovation and helps them stay abreast of their field and interrelated specialties. So I am hoping that this will be of use. Just sharing a couple of other families of journals that are found by the medical communities to be very, very impactful, of which most of us, we all have heard of definitely in the pandemic. So hopefully this will be of some use to you. The first one is the Lancet family. It has 24 premium journals in clinical medicine research. It is the most read and cited content on Science Direct. About 99 million full text article downloads annually. So it's a content that is very relevant to medical researchers and clinicians. Cell Press is a family of 56 high-impact journals in life, physical, and health sciences. As a fun fact here, I put 156 articles are being downloaded every minute from a Cell Press journal. And they have about 32 citations per publication, which is kind of quite a lot. So since we're talking about publishing and reading impactful content, I think this might be of relevance to you. And the third family is really societies publishing. Elsevier has contacts with several societies around the world, and these societies generally are very high impact content producers. They trust Elsevier with their publications, such as the American College of Cardiology, which is the publisher of JACC. And so, yeah, the great thing about society content is that they have multidisciplinary content across a very wide range of domains, 21 health science domains. Some of the key societies publishing with us are, of course, ACC, but also the American College of Chest Physicians, International Society of Nephrology, American Dental Association. Again, very relevant content, very much downloaded. Just a slide on Lancet, just to take you through the types of journals that we have. We have different specialties, right? Where there's the main journal, Lancet, but then there's the specialties, oncology, neurology, diabetes, respiratory medicine, and so on. But there are also journals that are region specific. So you would have Lancet Regional Health, for instance, which will tackle, and then for Europe, for United States, for Southeast Asia, and so on, that will tackle clinical issues that are relevant to those regions. So that might also be of interest to you. yeah, maybe it might be useful to know that the World Health Organization is using the Lancet content to guide their policy. And that's what I'm showing on the right side of the slide. On the left side, you again see some of the readers' feedback in the context of medicine and policy, basically. And they're saying that it helps them formulate positions based on medical evidence and opinion pieces. That Lancet covers just about every facet in medicine with integrity, transparency and clarity. And that, of course, the articles are of high validity and reliability. All of them, of course, are peer-reviewed. Some of the journals you might have heard of from Cell Press. Of course, Cell Journal is our flagship journal, but also maybe in the context of the recent Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine of 2023, the researchers that have been awarded this prize have published their research actually in immunity and in molecular therapy. We have this actually almost every year that Nobel Prize winners are publishing with us. So yeah, some of the journals that you may have been hearing or reading from are Immunity, Molecular Therapy, Neuron, Cancer Cell, Trends in Cancer. And then I've posted also two more recent journals that are clinical, with a clinical focus, and that's Med. It was launched in 2020, and again, it publishes clinical trial results and observations from longitudinal cohorts, pioneering discoveries about disease mechanisms in a wide range of specialties: cancer, cardiovascular, and metabolic diseases, clinical practice guidelines in digital health, so and many other areas. So again, that interdisciplinarity that might be of relevance to you. And on the right side, you're seeing the Cell Reports Medicine, which was also launched in 2020 and publishes, it's an open access journal, publishes translational and clinical medical research, and has many flexible kind of formats, many formats of publication. So that might also be interesting to you if you're considering submitting your publication. And last, actually, but absolutely not least, I just wanted to bring it back home by saying, you know, linking it back to Dr. Silverside's presentation. Jack, the entire family, but in this particular case, I'm showing the impact that this kind of high quality journals have on your publication and also on the science landscape. You're seeing here on the left side up, the Journal of American College of Cardiology has a field-weighted citation impact of 3.44, and in comparison to the cardiology and cardiovascular medicine research area, where the in total the field-weighted citation impact of the journals in this cardiology fields have about 1.01 field weighted citation impact. So that tells you already how important these kind of journals are and the impact that they have on the medical world. Yeah, JACC has about 37 citations per publication, while an average journal in cardiology will have about 10. So yeah, I hope this kind of just gives you a high level understanding of what other options you have. And here I have added the correct request access code if you want to use that. Oh, I'm sorry, am I still sharing? Yeah, I'm sharing. One moment, let me go back to the last slide. I'm going to leave you with this resources so that you know that you have a wealth of information available to you, be it on the JACC journals as such or on the high impact journals that I've just talked about. There's a wealth of webinars and podcasts. If you'd like to learn more about open access, it is all possible and available on different Elsevier and Science Direct sites. So feel free to do that. And now I will pass it on back to Vishal for the Q&A session. Thank
Thank
you
you so
all.
much. Thank you so much, Corina. And I was just going through the questions. We have a mix of different types of question, but I think Dr. Silversides, let's go with the generic questions first. I think one of the most interesting questions is about aspiring cardiologists. So according to you, what research skills do you think young aspiring cardiologists should focus on? Do you have any suggestions for medical students who are like beginners in research, but have a growing interest in cardiovascular research?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the first thing I would say is read studies. The more exposure you get to things, the more the smarter you will be about research methodologies. If there's ways for you um, to take courses, whether they're online or in person, that expose you to different methodologies. I would have to, and so for instance, I did a master's degree in biostats, which was very helpful. But I covered a lot of methodology there. Back in the day, you had to do it in a classroom. Nowadays, you can do it online. So I would try and educate yourself, because if you understand some of the methodologies, it's extremely helpful going forward in a research career. Personally, if I was really young and just starting again, I would probably go back and learn AI methodologies, which are a whole new field that's evolving. It's different. You approach problems differently. The stats are done differently. There's new ways of looking at problems. And so that's all coming. So if you want to be really cutting edge, I would probably say at least think about understanding that aspect of research, because it's coming at a fast and furious pace. But, as a really young person, I would say, though, what I haven't said, and I think is most critical, is finding a mentor who will take you under their wing and try and help you along, get your first small studies off the ground. Don't do big ones at the start. Do small contained ones that you can get done in a finite period of time and get out there, or go to meet and get to a meeting and present it, and just learn what the research community is about. But make sure that somebody has your back when you're starting out. It's so helpful. And so one of the problems, I think, when you're just starting is you may get a mentor that is kind of partly engaged, but not really engaged and not really helping you. It's hard to know sometimes in advance if that person will or won't be that way, but that person tends to not be as helpful. You really need somebody that will help you design your study, that will actually read your paper, edit your paper, go back and forth trying to get it in the best possible shape, because that is the way you will learn the most. There is no, I said, you want the background coursework, you want to understand things, but that mentor is critical. And so I would say ask around. If you've worked with somebody and have a really good feeling that they will help you out, perhaps that should be the person you approach. But think long and hard about your mentor, because they can really either get you off the ground or sink you.
Thank you so much. That's really comprehensive. A question about, I think this is something which I think every editor gets asked, especially, as a author, when you are publishing, what are your tips on when a reviewer has questions about your manuscript? What should the author absolutely not do? So things to avoid completely. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if reviewers have questions, your best bet is try and answer the question as respectfully as you can, even if they're kind of grating under your skin with the question. Um, First of all, some of the questions may be great. You may end up with a better product if you answer them and integrate them into your paper. So I still always would think of it that way. People are trying to help out, I would assume. There are questions you simply can't answer. And I think if long as you can either say it's not feasible, or you can also respectfully disagree if you think something fundamentally isn't right. So I think as long as you answer it fairly and clearly, that's a reasonable, and do your best. People will take that into account. Nobody can address every single question every single time um, in the most complete way. And so you do what you think is reasonable, provide answers for why you did or didn't do something. And usually I think you'll get a fair.
And I think you mentioned everything, but one thing again that comes to my mind is, I think, clearly highlight what changes you made where you made them,
Yeah,
and probably prepare a cover letter that summarizes
sure.
everything so that it
Yeah,
becomes easy. Yeah.
that would, I would say, is fundamental.
Yes.
I was telling you how to address it, but that sure, that is actually the most important thing, that you
Yeah.
address every comment in a point by point letter. Now,
Mhm.
one other thing to mention is your responses will sometimes, not always, but sometimes go back to the original reviewer. So two things. One is you want to make it easy for them to know what you've done, where you've done it, and how you've addressed their comments. But I think that's one of the other reasons I said do it respectfully, explaining what you can or can't do, because it could very well be the same person looking at your paper.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Thank you. Okay, another last generic question, then we go into some specific questions around some topics. So, how do you, as an author, how do you recognize predatory journals apart from the quality journals? What strategies do you employ?
I probably don't have the best approach. I think there's probably people that could provide a better answer here. I've
Yep.
been doing this for quite a while, so I would say some of the predatory journals I just know, and it's from word of mouth. That's not a good answer, because I don't know if everybody is in a circle where they're talking about, oh, this journal is questionable or that journal isn't. I know there is resources online where you can look up if journals are legitimate and not predatory. So
Mhm.
unfortunately, I can't direct you to
No.
the exact site, but I know it is available.
Mhm.
But unfortunately for me, my answer isn't really that helpful, because a lot of it is just by word of mouth by people I
Mhm.
speak with. But I would say if you're not sure, look online.
Mhm.
I
Do
don't
you
know
mind?
if you have other
Yeah.
tips,
No.
Michelle or Karina.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, do you mind if I take this
Yes,
one?
please
Yeah.
go ahead. Yep.
Okay, so actually we do a lot of author workshops as well, and this is like one of the very important topics that we talk about. I think from a publisher's point of view, if you look at it, I think first thing that you should look at is the peer review process. Most of the robust academic journals, they typically have a very rigorous peer review process, and submissions are critically evaluated. And for that matter, you need to also have a look at the editorial board. So legitimate journals have established editorial boards, that comprise of region recognized experts in that field. And predatory journals may actually list individuals. I have seen journals where they've listed board members without even their knowledge. And sometimes not even the credentials, just the name, designation. They will often have a residential email, a residential address, and a Gmail ID. They do not comply with COPE guidelines, the Committee on Publication Ethics guidelines. I think that is something that you can definitely look up to. Good journals are usually registered with COPE. I think also something to look at is the indexing and impact factor. Most of these predatory journals, they often display fake impact factors. You should always go back and check, using the right website. And then there, the journal's website and communication, often they have a lot of spelling mistakes, a lot of grammar errors, sometimes deliberately. Because I saw one example is one journal said this journal is indexed in Scopus. And I was like, this is not. But when I checked carefully, the spelling of Scopus was Scopas, which is not Scopus, right? Which is Scopas. So basically, they try and play with these things, and so you have to be really careful. And I think two very important things that you can look at is journal history and reputation. As Dr. Silverside said, word of mouth often talks about reputation and the journal history, and also consulting blacklists and whitelists. So there is a Bell lists of predatory journals. There are other lists also available. There is a website called Think, Check, Submit. I think you could refer that as well. And I think a combination of all these strategies can help you. But it is a very difficult process. It's not that easy. They are earning loads and loads of money. So you will have to be really, really careful, right?
Yeah, I assume the lists are the quickest way to do it.
Yeah. Mhm.
Because the problem is they do put fake editorial board members on the websites, and then
Right.
then you might think it's legitimate,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, true.
Um,
Okay, let's go into a little bit of specific questions now related to JACC journals. So, according to you, what does JACC group of journals look for in assessing studies applying AI technology to cardiology? Is there something specific that you look at?
Yeah, I think first, I mentioned it in one of those earlier slides, but it's really science that will advance clinical care or spur new research, maybe in the case of JACC Basic and Translational Science. So you really want to make sure, even if you're using AI methodologies, that you're answering clinically relevant questions. I mean, you also have to make sure you're using AI methodologies correctly. With AI studies, you usually have to validate it in an independent sample. And so, so that's what I would say. Start by making sure it's still a clinical question. If it's a pure methodologic study about using a new AI technology, that's not for a clinical cardiology journal. But
Mhm.
also, if you are going to do AI, please make sure you're using standardized methodologies and validating it in an independent data set.
Yeah. I think it also partially answers the next question, which was, when do you look at a manuscript and say that this should be transferred to a sister journal or a sub-journal, right? When do
Yeah,
you? Hmm.
yeah, I think so. I'm just going to say one thing about looking at manuscripts. It's great to have a good cover letter, put it together, it's helpful. But to be honest, the very first thing I do is I read your abstract. And so, just as a background, make sure your abstract's clean, make sure you list objectives, make sure you at least describe the methodology. People often don't describe chunks of methodology in the abstract, and so you can't really put together the study, but a lot of people use that as a first screening tool so you understand what the study is about. So make your abstract clean, concise, and that it says the main points. But once you've read it, I think you look at what the message is, what the study is about, what the message is. And, if it was for instance, I mean, JACC Advances is quite general, so we take a broad scope of cardiovascular studies. But say, for instance, if it's very specific to a niche area like cardio oncology, for instance, and if so there's a lot of cardio oncology research that would be relevant for a general cardiologist. So that would be good for JACC Advances. But if it's highly technical or very specialized and perhaps best for the cardio oncology community, and not a broader audience, then it would be shifted over to that journal. And similarly, if it was basic science, it would go to the basic science journal. If it's interventional cardiology, for example, that's very broad. That could go in most general cardiology journals. But if it's very technical, that may be more relevant for interventionalists and an interventional journal where they want the technical aspect of things compared to a general cardiologist who wants a clinical message for the study. So I think it's really just reading the study and deciding how focused it is. And if it, as I said, if it's could relate to a general cardiologist using the information, at least for JACC Advances, it would stay with JACC Advances.
Thank you. Another question is, a participant says that they've done several retrospective studies. So they would like to know, in terms of, JACC group of journals, is there a trend that retrospective studies are more likely to be rejected?
Well, I say, there's always a hierarchy. If you have a randomized clinical trial that's done properly, that being said, that will always be a higher impact study than a retrospective study, but there is lots of retrospective studies that get published. And I think if retrospective is the way to answer a clinical question, then that's the way to answer the clinical question.
Mm.
It has to be an important clinical question. So yes, prospective randomized trials are really going to be the ideal methodology, but not everything can be answered that way. There is a lot of different ways to skin a cat. And so just because it's retrospective doesn't mean it'll be published, but it's harder to get it published. You got to make sure you're answering a really good question if you're going to use that methodology.
Thank you so much. Another question says that should journals request Python or SPSS script of the analysis? I think mainly talking about scripting language. Do you have any comments around this?
You mean I assume stats languages for SPSS? You mean
Yes.
the like the codes you put in
Yes.
to
Yes.
run your models? Yeah, I
Yes.
mean, there's been interest in having both data sets and codes available for people to look at the data, and maybe it'll come in the future. I think right now it's not clear whether or not the work involved of collecting that on every study that's ever submitted is a good yield, is a good
Mhm.
time investment for
Mhm.
journals. But I mean, maybe there will be a time. Certainly, there is a movement that you're as transparent as you can with your data. And
Exactly.
so it may happen in the future. I don't think it'll happen anytime soon.
Mhm. Yeah, just to add on to what Dr. Silverside said, I think journals usually do not prescribe any specific scripting language. They usually keep it open uh, and ask the authors to submit a format that is easily accessible. But then I think as Dr. Silversides mentioned, the main aim is to foster transparency and reproducibility in research, and therefore these codes they often help in improving the credibility and influence of the published work. But yeah, I mean, as Dr. Silverside said, the trend is picking up. So maybe in the future, we see
I
more
I would
around
only
this.
say that the trend's been going on for a long time. They've been talking, people have been talking about this for more than 20 years, maybe longer. But it still may come. I mean, you see some of those hubs where you can share code. Clearly, there is a community out there where it's starting to happen, independent of the journals.
Right, right. And finally, before it's just time, let's take one difficult question in the end. What's your take on the publication fees? The APC charges. So yeah, I mean, this is something that comes up in every Elsevier webinar as well. So happy to answer that as well. But Dr. Silversides, what's your take on this specific area?
I think it's tough.
Hmm.
It's fine if you're an established researcher with a big budget. It's not an issue. When you don't have a big budget, then it's coming from your own funds and it's difficult. So I said, when I mentioned open access, there's actually things I love. I love the fact that people can go to Jack Advances and anybody can read any paper they want. I love that. Finding the sweet spot about the cost. I mean, clearly there will be a cost if it's going to change to that model, but finding the exact price point is difficult. And clearly, some journals have much higher price points than others. I can tell you most journals will have some way to help out people if need be. So, for instance, in the Jack journals, there's discounts if you're an ACC member. There's discounts for a number of things. If somebody really doesn't have the funds to pay, if they're from a country, for instance, a middle or lower income country, you can actually write the editor and say, hey, look, is there any way you can help me? I'd really like to get this out there. That again, once it's already been accepted, but I'm really short funds. I don't have independent funding, and and there's ways we can help. So I think the exact price point, I can't tell you what it should be. I think it should be a continued work in progress, though, because it is difficult. Um, but I do think there's current ways we can help you if you're stuck with an open access fee that you can't pay. Um, the journal editors will try and do their
Yep.
best to help.
Yep. You correctly said it's work in progress, and there are a lot of efforts being made by all publishers across all publishers. And you see these various publishing models coming up. We have hybrid journals where you have the option to not only publish your subscribed articles in it where you don't pay a fee, but then also you can pay an APC fee and make your article open access. In fact, all Elsevier journals offer the option of publishing via the green open access route to all the authors. So I think the authors should also explore the other available options available to them to publish more. Right. So yeah, I think we've covered quite a lot of, not all questions, unfortunately, but yeah, I think it's time. And what we will do is all the questions that we were not able to pick up during this session, we will probably share those with Dr. Silversides. And if you could be kind enough to, just give us a little bit of your perspective, we can add on to that and we can share with the participants as well, right? Corina, is there anything that you would like to add on?
I've thoroughly enjoyed today. It was fantastic. Thank you so much, Dr. Silversides, and your contributions as well, Vishal. Thank you very much, everyone on the line as well. I thought it was a very insightful webinar.
Thank you so much, Dr. Silversides and Corina. And to all the participants, we will be sharing the slides with you. We will be sharing all other resources that might be helpful with you and the recording of this webinar, uh, maybe in a day or two. So thank you for attending. Thank you for taking our time. Thank you, Dr. Silversides, again, for sparing your time and helping us with that presentation. I wish you all the best and have a good rest of the day. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.